Taking you now to Vancouver, British Columbia health officials providing an update on the coronavirus outbreak in the province.
2 people who are residents of a long-term care home on the North Shore tested positive, so we are in what we call an outbreak. This is one of the scenarios that we have been, of course, most concerned about. We know that the risk for elderly people having this disease is very concerning. There are a number of others across the province who we have been in contact with in the last few days, and there may indeed be more people who turn up positive. The message that I think is so important for British Columbians today is that you need to stay home when you're sick. If you've traveled, even if you haven't traveled, now is the time. We are in an extraordinary situation. We need everybody to be aware, to look after their children, to understand if you or your children are sick, stay home.
That moment when you were on camera and teared up, you could see what was coming and you were staring into that abyss and you just dreaded it.
If you have people in your gathering who are elderly, who are more that's exactly what it was. It was once it got into long-term care homes, I was so, I knew there was going to be suffering, and I knew it was going to, I could see what others had not yet seen.
She knew this was coming. She knew that the virus was going to spread and that in some cases, healthy, unvaccinated people were going to die.
The anguish that Bonnie went through, saying that you couldn't go see your loved ones in long-term care, that's just a very difficult message to deliver.
I mean, Bonnie Henry is not a robot. She has her emotions just like everyone else, and she was wearing them.
Just take it. It's okay.
Who are more susceptible to having severe illness from this disease.
That was an incredibly difficult position to put a person into.
That moment that she shed those tears, people were able to see her humility, her compassion, and I think her strength.
It's the authenticity that is the special sauce in a politician or in a leader. People feel like they understand that person and they're more willing to listen to them. The number one thing you're trying for in this is integrity and trust in the public, and Dr. Henry managed to achieve that.
I'm calling on all of us in BC to do what we need to do to protect our seniors and elders in our community and to keep them safe.
I have this sense from our childhood, ever since I can remember, you knew you wanted to be a doctor. Was there a moment when you realized that? Or
The time that you had appendicitis and were in the hospital.
Yeah.
I remember being fascinated.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I never wanted to be a nurse.
No.
Which is interesting.
I don't think you wanted to take care of people necessarily. I think you wanted to help people by figuring out.
Yes,
like
exactly.
it's the puzzle, the mystery. The impulse wasn't so much I'm
No,
going to
it
soothe
wasn't.
you and make you better. It was
No, it was about understanding, what were the symptoms, what
Yeah.
could be causing it, what do you need to do to make it better, and
here you go. This is what you need to do.
figuring out the puzzle of
Yeah.
the illness. Yeah, in medical school, I was never kind of sure exactly what area of medicine I wanted to go into, but then of course I joined the Navy, which is a challenge for someone like me who gets motion sick. So it was challenging sometimes to be the only woman on board the ship for that period of time. I was young, 25, 26.
Yeah.
There's about 1,000 people mostly guys, and that were all my patients. They used to laugh at me saying, you know, I'd stand when we go into foreign ports, I'd have sunscreen and condoms to give out to people as they were going ashore. Yeah. Most people were great, and some of the older non-commissioned officers, they're called the chiefs and petty officers, they were super. Mm-hmm. It was actually some of the younger officers, male officers, who gave me the hardest time because they were used to having their, being the boys' club, and they could do and say whatever they wanted. And I used to think sometimes I'd just like to go through the day without somebody reminding me that, oh, you wouldn't understand because you're a woman, or you don't do this because you're a woman.
Public health, at its best, it's a genuine social contract. It's actually having meaningful conversations with people, not just about what is good for you or not good for you, but what are your values. Some of the interventions we do seem pedestrian. It's not a liver transplant, but it has enormous impact, and we've just seen how much impact it can have.
We're going to be around here. It's great to be here. It's great to be here at London Drugs today. There are going to be people in the millions who are going to get their booster dose against COVID-19 in the community pharmacy. This is a transformation. I wanted to invite Dr. Henry, Dr. Bonnie Henry, to say a few words, just to identify in case you were expecting some other Dr. Henry. But it's Dr. Bonnie Henry to say a few words.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here today on the traditional and unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And we think about that every day, about how privileged we are to live and work on these lands. One of the things that has been incredibly important about our immunization program is making sure that we record every single dose and lot number that went into every arm.
Under the BC Public Health Act, the Provincial Health Officer has the responsibility for reporting out on the health of the community and making recommendations. And obviously, sometimes those recommendations may run into political opposition. You can make the recommendations, but you don't have any authority to actually implement them, except when you have a real emergency in a pandemic, when you do have authority to order people to do things, which otherwise you would not have the authority to do.
So I'm just really, really pleased that we're able to kick off this program today, especially now in the situation that we're in with so many unknowns.
You're always dealing with a slight lack of information. You never have all the information. You also worry if you're doing too little or if you're doing too much, because you'll be critiqued for one or the other.
About Alberta rolling out the free rapid test. Is BC going to be doing the same thing too, rolling out that?
So we're going to be speaking to those issues at 1:30, and we're giving a full briefing on the pandemic in BC at that time, so we'll be speaking to those issues as well.
What time is our tech briefing? 12:15. Oh, okay. We've got an hour to solve everything.
We'll see. We've got an hour to solve everything. Well, some of that time will be spent briefing the media.
You're doing a great job. I'm so proud. I wish more people would listen.
You got your booster dose?
Oh, I've got all of them.
Oh, good. Do my RuPaul. I think people think they know me, but it's a little strange because there's Dr. Bonnie Henry, and then there's me. Although a lot of it is the same. It's strange to be recognized. Normally I would just take public transit, but these days it's not a good idea.
I first met Bonnie when I became Premier, and she had moved up from a Deputy Public Health Officer to be the Public Health Officer for BC. The gentleman she replaced was a guy named Dr. Perry Kendall, who had been in the position for a long time. And when the prospect of COVID-19 came onto the public landscape, I was thinking, I didn't know Bonnie, I know Perry Kendall. British Columbians know Perry Kendall, and maybe we should ask Perry to come back.
Bonnie confided in me that when the pandemic hit and they realized it was going to be serious, there was some people said, oh, we should bring Dr. Kendall back because of his past history and he's known to everybody. And she said, no, you don't need to do that.
And of course, then I met with Bonnie and got briefed on it, and I didn't think for a second that anyone but her could carry this message.
John Horgan did the right thing, I think, during the pandemic by backing away We've never seen the system change like that in government. It's always centered around the Premier and his staff. And instead, in the pandemic at its peak, it was Adrian Dix and Dr. Henry alone, changing things and informing everybody else about it.
All right.
I mean, I think there's a couple of things. I think on advice, I think you should try to be sharp. Like, what's your advice? Don't go to parties. You know, like family gatherings good, but don't go to parties where you don't know everybody, you don't know the result. I think that's something really clear is what people want to hear on that.
Often you'll have a government announcement come. Province will take 1, 2, 3 months, if not longer, to plan it, to launch a communications plan, to prepare their slideshows. You were seeing Dr. Bonnie Henry and Minister Dix announcing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these major things, even in the span of one press conference.
And we've been expanding access to PCR testing to support schools. Where they're not useful, and this is going to be the difficult message, where they're not useful is a one of, I'm vaccinated, I want to go to a party, or I want to go visit my...
Well, that point you can that point you can address. I think you just have to address it straight on from a healthcare point of view in your discussion.
Adrian Dix and Bonnie Henry consolidated decision-making down to 2 people, and they managed from a public front to present a unified message throughout the entire pandemic. Did they always agree? Not from what I've heard, no. And sometimes on very fundamental things.
People aren't going to be satisfied that against Alberta giving one to everybody or whatever they're doing.
Well, they're not. They don't have enough.
They don't have enough?
They have 500,000 tests that they're putting out into pharmacies.
Yeah, but no, I'm just saying they're these grandiose announcements that other jurisdictions are making, both don't make sense, and that's not what we're doing, but this is what we are doing. I think we just have to focus in on what we're doing.
I think at times there was a struggle of who was going to play the lead violin in this, that Dr. Henry was handed the responsibility from the Premier to be responsible for it. And at times, Minister Dix wanted to assume a greater role in that decision-making.
Our job here is largely to facilitate it. So you're going to see a news conference where I introduce it, but Dr. Henry speaks first. She's at the podium for questions. I answer them sometimes, but she's always first, because we have consistently supported a public health approach. And so they're going to hear from someone who's a world leader dealing with pandemics. So the key thing that's going to happen today is bringing the science to the people through Dr. Henry.
Each morning we would have those daily media calls. It was interesting to see just how important word choice was, because she knew that her word choice was going to matter, and when she used it was going to matter. She wanted to make sure that she was using the right words at the right time so that people took things seriously at the right times and didn't panic at the wrong times.
Before I share the modeling information, I did want to pause and acknowledge the fact that we have lost a record number of our community members to the toxic drug crisis here in BC in the month of October. And back to COVID-19, we are in a place right now where there's still a degree of uncertainty, as we talked about yesterday with the Omicron variant that we're seeing now. We need to protect ourselves. We need to protect ourselves by getting vaccinated. We want to ensure that this time of the year is a joyous time of the year. So that means going out for a walk with somebody, remembering to find that joy every day in our lives, and support each other to do that, as we have been all along, with kindness and compassion. Thank you.
Our first question today goes to Rob Shaw, Check News.
You said that if you could get that Roche brand take-home rapid tests from Ottawa by mid-January, you'd be distributing them in some way. So does that mean that BC would be providing them for free to the public to take home, like we are seeing in other provinces?
The short answer is yes. There are different types of rapid antigen tests that are available. Many of them that we have are ones that require a health professional to take an MP swab, and we've deployed those in areas where they're most useful.
I think by the time the rapid test debate came around, it was fueled by extreme public frustration. People didn't care about the science of their effectiveness. They didn't care about why government had to break them up into smaller bags. They just wanted them now.
I do want to caution that, especially in a highly vaccinated population, all of these rapid tests have limitations.
Why aren't you using the contact tracing app? There was always a gizmo that came on the market, and that's what you should be using. And if you're not using it, you're not trying hard enough. You're not doing what Ontario is doing. The rapid test had its place and it absolutely had a role. But there came this belief that more is better and more is more better.
So we can't rely on them for that sort of single use, I'll just test myself and I'm fine. We need to continue to take all of those precautions and to be mindful and prudent through this period of time.
It led to people saying, what am I not getting? And that is one of the biggest challenges in politics and governance and life, is like you look over to your neighbor and you say, why does my neighbor have something that I don't have? And it leads to frustration, in this case, frustration with provincial health.
We need to be thoughtful about how we approach these holidays, and more than ever need to be prudent. Oh, I didn't put out the numbers of rapid tests that we had and the different types, which I was meant to do. And it's because I get caught up on what I was going to say with the presentation, and then it was going long, and I thought, anyway, like I talked with my team ahead of time, what is our tone, what is our message, what are the key things we're going to say? But then there's always something new. Oh, this morning Ontario said this, Alberta's doing this, and so, you get on the call, call my counterpart in Alberta, what's going on? One of the things that I've learned in my life is that not making a decision in the face of not having all the answers has its own ramifications and has implications in and of itself. So having to make decisions with imperfect information is something that I've trained for.
Dr. Bonnie, you're fantastic, and thank you so much for all your hard work.
I think one of the challenges she faced is that there was one face to the pandemic. In most places, you go to British Columbia, Alberta, and then Canada as a whole, there were one or two people in front of the camera. I think that created a challenge of wearing all the decisions. I also don't think public information via that medium of the scrum was a particularly good venue for health information to be communicated. You answer in the moment. Of course, she's prepared and all that is in place, but still, it's not a natural conversation.
Some of the most vivid memories I have from the outbreak, the Ebola outbreak in Uganda, is the impact of the virus on an already traumatized population, because there was the Lord's Resistance Army was very active. It was northern Uganda on the border with South Sudan, and the LRA would come in at night and steal children and take them away to be child soldiers. Adding these complex emergencies and the fact that each piece causes additional trauma to people, and being clearly from a white woman from somewhere else, there was a lot of fear that we had somehow had witchcraft or things that we were keeping from others that kept us from getting sick. So having to build those bonds of trust. Albert Camus, who says, pestilence kills its thousands, but fear kills its tens of thousands. And I realized how important communication was. And part of my job was to talk with the community leaders, to support the local health officer, to talk to religious leaders. It became so important, and how you classified things, and that the words you use could make people more afraid or less afraid. They could give people confidence that they knew what to do, or they could make them shun and turn away from others. There are things we don't know, but that's okay. And here's how we're going to find out what they are. And here's what we're going to do with the information we have now. And how to engender confidence even when you do have uncertainty. When people were recovered, there was still so much suspicion in the community that if there was a reason why this person was recovered, but they could still bring the disease back into the village. At the time, everything was bleach everywhere, and people were wearing rubber boots, and you didn't shake hands. And
so how did you explain?
Come back into the community, and I would walk with the person and hold their hand. And it was that it's okay, you can accept people back into the community. Oh, shoot.
I'll work with it.
Okay. Just trying to remember what we said about the things we have going for us. I've lost my notes.
Yeah, we'll reinforce that. An outstanding team of contact tracers, effective use of rapid tests, which supplants our efforts and which is going to get stronger next week. You know, those kind of things.
Hey.
Let's roll. A little bit.
Uh-huh.
Okay. It's live?
Yeah.
Okay. News release is live. That's okay?
My mother does watch all these still.
Does she?
Yes, apparently. I think she watches to just know that I'm still alive.
Get connected, yeah. I'm sure it's very stressful for her too. She tries to.
We briefly brought in the A-team, but she's departing.
I thought she was going to just go up there.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi. You look lovely.
Okay, well, here. Thank you very much and good afternoon. As we have all seen in recent weeks, the newest variant, the Omicron variant of concern, is adding new and more complex challenges. We will see rapidly rising cases over the next few weeks, and we need to take additional measures to slow that down so that we don't overwhelm our hospital system. We need to put in new measures in place for everyone.
I think people forget, based on what we have gone through over 2.5 years, how extraordinary public health measures are. And ultimately, the understanding and sense I get is that there was some reluctance from Dr. Henry even to do it, that she would like to provide people the information to make their own decisions.
Firstly, the events and gatherings order will be amended, limited to your household or the residents, plus no more than 10 additional individuals, or one other household. And this is if everybody is vaccinated.
People, you need to amend your behavior in the interest of the greater good. You can intellectually and theoretically talk about these things, but then when you actually have to do it, it's an ominous responsibility, and Bonnie took it very, very seriously, as did Adrian and I, of course.
All New Year's Eve parties will be suspended, no matter their size. What we want to do right now is limit those holiday gatherings to be only with our family and close friends. And we need to be with family and friends over this period of time. Excuse me. Sometimes it can be challenging to think, are we going to make it through this year? We are. We know what we need to do, and we've been here before. We know we can slow the spread. We know there are many things that we can still do to support each other and to get through this. I recognize that this unrelenting uncertainty and this evolving situation is very unsettling for many people, and it can cause a lot of anxiety, depression, and discouragement. So I ask everyone, please continue to be kind, to be calm, and to be safe. Thank you.
Our first question is here in the room, Richard Sussman.
I'm trying to understand the restrictions on social gatherings. You have one household, they can invite over 10 other people or another household. How does this work with families that may have one other family of 4 plus 2 others? Like, I'm just not sure how people are supposed to do this.
Yeah, so, you know, what I'm hearing very clearly from people is they want direction about how to do this in the best way that we can. And we recognize that people have to get together, and it doesn't have to be 10. It can be fewer than that. So spend time with people that you want to spend time with or that you need to spend time with right now. Keep it as small as possible. Whew. So what do you think?
You did very well.
You did really well. Is it okay? All right. Putting on orders is something that we do as a last resort. It's not something I take lightly. And, you know, we look at all of the ethical principles about least restrictive means and giving people the means to do what you need them to do, and really taking away some of those liberties. It really has to be justified. What are the things that we can do that will minimize it, but still allow us to have those important connections with people? So, yeah.
What was the piece that made you a little emotional, and why?
Well, I was just thinking about people needing to come together right now.
Now, I wish this pandemic were over because, you know, at this time of the year, what everybody's been through here in BC with, you know, the pandemic and then the heat wave and wildfires and smoke and evacuations and then the fourth wave in September, October, and then, of course, the horrendous atmospheric river. I mean, who'd heard of heat domes and atmospheric rivers before this year? And the disruption of people's lives in so many communities because of the flooding and every single major highway being damaged so that it couldn't be. I mean, people need each other. So I wanted it to focus on the things that we can still find joy, we can still be together, we can still support each other. Even with a hard time and yet another blow that we didn't need and didn't want, but we have no control over.
I think she was trying to use the mindset that people had in 2020, which was, I will do everything provincial health tells me, and apply it to late 2021, where that mindset was no longer the case. People desperately wanted to celebrate the holidays together, and they were going to do it likely no matter what.
She was trying very hard to control the public message, and they thought they could cash in on the credibility from earlier in the pandemic and ram it down the public's throat the way they wanted to do it, and it did not work.
What have we got? 176 emails. This one is a simple one, in capital letters, fuck you. It's unfortunate, and you know, sometimes it's just people venting, which is, I think like some of the ones that have been very specific threats that go to the police, so the RCMP, the security folk monitor some of the more egregious ones, and my team does too, and they've actually gone to and found some of these people and said, you know, that this is, one, it's illegal because it's a specific threat, but that, and many of them say, well, you know, I was just angry. They don't realize the impact it has on you when you receive these really nasty things. And I do joke about it, but it's, yeah, it's hard. It's a way of dehumanizing me. You're doing a terrible job. Resign. This was one of the not so nice ones. Sounds like an angry man. I take solace in knowing that, you know, we're trying to find a path that minimizes harms, and you know, I know these vaccines are making a massive difference in saving lives. Yeah, that's cute. I do science like a girl. So I had to call my sister this morning because there's so much going on. Get a little pep talk from her. I know what a toll this whole time has taken on her. Of course, my instinct is very protective. To see the vulnerability makes me want to protect my sister, make it okay, which I know we can't. I think that vulnerability is also hugely powerful. In the best possible circumstances, I guess, it allows people to feel that we are all in this together, no matter who you are.
One of the things that will stand out to me forever is someone within the government's inner orbit told me at the beginning that at one of the first internal meetings, someone said, we are gonna build this woman up so high, and when we knock her down, it is going to hurt on the way down. And that is one of the challenges with someone who rose as quickly as Dr. Bonnie Henry. She was adored nationally and internationally, that when things start to turn, that fall is faster and further, and it hurts more when you land.
I get it, why the Premier of British Columbia would require security, and I knew that when I got into the job. I knew that the one before me had security and the one before that had security. There's never been security for a public health officer in British Columbia, and that speaks to the level of frustration that the public had with the situation we found ourselves in. Bonnie was just collateral damage in that.
I don't think that ever got easier for her. It's something that we constantly would try to protect her from, but Bonnie would try to protect the people who are trying to protect her from it.
I am very blessed. We all do this every year. We hang Christmas decorations on the boulevards. We've gone to town.
All right, now all we need is a sunny day.
Yeah, exactly.
How are you doing?
Okay.
You sounded exhausted today, actually, I have to say. Yeah, I mean, we're all waiting for good
Discouraged
news.
a little bit.
I know.
And we were getting there. We were doing
I know. Do you have your sister coming over for Christmas, or is she?
Not for Christmas. She's home in PEI with my parents.
Oh, is she? Lucky person.
Yeah.
When I listen to you speak, I just pick up that maritime. There's a little bit of maritime still there, but you haven't used the word friggin'.
Darn.
Yeah, they're good maritime words.
I used other F words recently
yeah,
too.
I'm sure. Well, nice to see you. That's the season.
It's such a nice little neighborhood. You ever read the book Quiet? It's about how there's strength in introverts, and that it's mostly a reflection, I think, of society in the US, where loud, extroverted, outgoing people are seen as more successful
And competent.
And
Yeah.
competent. Sometimes I have to say, no, wait, I need to think.
Right.
I need to have a bit of time to think. One of the things that I recognize is that I'm really averse to conflict.
I think that's something that comes from our family
It
in a
does,
huge way.
absolutely.
It's like we're a very conflict averse family.
That's why I value running so much.
Mhm.
It's a time that I think. And sometimes I need to ruminate overnight before we make a big decision.
Mhm.
And I do get these epiphanies. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
that's what it means. That's how I frame this.
Thank you for doing this. I know that you're busy, so I appreciate you stealing some time to talk to us.
Of course.
When you talk about managing the virus and say we have to change our way of thinking, why is now the time to change our way of thinking when it comes to COVID-19?
Yeah, it's not something that we really have that choice on. It's because of the way the virus has changed. It's different now. The virus properties have changed, and it's spreading much more easily. That is why I put in the additional orders that we did in December and continue to have those. We know that this is mostly transmitted when we're having those social connections together.
One of the greatest challenges was the challenge in pivoting when we moved away from that acute emergency response to something that we clearly were going to live with in the medium term. What is sustainable for 6 weeks is not necessarily sustainable for 6 months.
Do we need now to think differently about risk in the face of this virus? Do we need to move toward a moment where we're embracing more risk and stop being risk averse, do you think?
And I do feel like we had really good systems in place to provide epidemiological information. So information about the virus. We had very good and deep systems about that. But a pandemic is so much bigger than a virus. It's so much bigger than an outbreak. It's a social phenomenon. It's an economic phenomenon. It's a psychological phenomenon.
Let me just ask you a couple more questions. One is, you face a lot of criticism from a lot of different perspectives and points of view. How much of that are you aware of? How much of that do you take in?
It's, what can I say? It's really, really hard, some of that. It does spill over, and I do, I had protesters come to my house on the weekend, which is very disconcerting, let's just say, and intentionally trying to incite violence against people like myself, politicians who are trying to do their best. That part of it is really hard to take.
It gives you pause when you're describing that. What is that like when there are people who are outside your house protesting? They're fomenting anger, but also trying, something's happening. So when that happens, what is that like?
There's a sense of fear, obviously, because some of the tactics that these groups, and it's a very small minority, but people see this, is othering, right? It's comparing you to people who in history have been hung or shot, or, and it gives a certain group of people license
to treat you as other, and to, so, you know, the psychology of that is something that is designed to create fear, and that part is hard to take.
We're now entering the third year of this thing. Where are you finding hope right now?
You know, hope is a day-to-day thing, and I do find hope every day. I find hope in the kids that I talk to, the young people in my life who are managing this, and, you know, they tell me, I was very worried about, you know, young kids wearing masks in school, and they're like, oh, we figured it out, it's okay. So, you know, I get reassurance and hope because I know people are coping with this, and that we can do this together. And where I come from in PEI, you know, we talk about common suffering builds strong bonds. And I see that every day. I see that every day in my colleagues who are nurses and physicians who go into work even though they know it's going to be a stressful day and that there's too many people in the ICU and they're going to have to make really tough decisions. I see it in kids going to school and educators and, you know, teachers who are just so happy to be back in the classroom and supporting young people. You know, I see it in First Nations communities who are protecting their elders and seniors and preserving their, despite all the odds. So I think there is so much to be hopeful for. And I know we'll get through this pandemic. I know that we'll learn to live with this and that some of these things will become part of our lexicon in our life, and we'll be okay with that. And I hope as well that we'll be learning from this and be able to build back not just our healthcare system, but recognizing some of those inequities and actually addressing them.
It's good to speak with you again, Dr. Henry. I appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
That was excellent. Thank you very much.
No, thanks.
I appreciate it. Good luck. You still running and trying?
I am. You know, then one advantage I have with having my RCMP team with me all the time is that I make them go running with me at 5:30 in the morning.
I'm sure they're delighted.
They actually, they're lovely people. I'm really blessed, and they do like it because at least I keep them active.
It must be really strange to have you can just go running. You have an RCMP team around you.
I have no, you know, my life is very constrained. I can't go out, and, you know, this thing on Saturday, as much as I try and downplay it, it was frightening, and it was frightening to my neighbors. I have 2 kids who live next door to me who are children with special needs who were freaked out by it, and, you know, that's not fair to them.
I'm sorry for that, but I'm glad to speak with you, and I hope we have the chance to talk again.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Take care.
And you. Bye-bye.
The wave is such an interesting metaphor that we've been using through the pandemic. And when we look at those first 4 weeks, it seemed like an eternity. And now, of course, there's a pattern that people recognize. It is like a wave. Every single phase or wave that we've been through has had different challenges. Yeah. For some reason, infectious diseases still have this layer of stigma that is different from other things. You know, if you have cancer, it's not your fault, but somehow, especially early on, when people were targeting Asian people because there was this sense that it's your fault, that you're bringing it. And so having to get over that, and I think that was one of the things we tried to do really early, was talk about how, you know, this isn't about othering, it's about all of us. The fact that so many of the people who have stepped up to lead in this time are women. Do you think that's
Yeah, you know, I'm really proud of that in terms of, you know, my colleagues across the country. It's been very, what's the right word? I don't know. Rewarding in a sense, but also gives me courage too.
Yeah.
Probably one of the biggest things for COVID is that it really amplified and intensified inequities that have been long-standing due to structural racism and white supremacy. The timing of it, COVID starting in the spring of 2020 and in the fall of 2019, our legislature passed the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. So it actually came at a time when we finally have a legal structure and framework through which to uphold our rights as Indigenous Indigenous peoples. So you have both things happening. The legal backbone to really allow us to be self-determining and uphold our rights, and also having this grand calamity that brought into stark relief those day-to-day inequities that people are living. Because of course, we as Indigenous peoples, because we've been made vulnerable by colonial practices and policies, we were more likely to get sick with COVID. If we got COVID, we were more likely to have underlying illness and other diseases that would make us more likely to have serious outcomes. Good governance means that we're deliberate about who's making decisions, and we make sure that they're collaborative decisions and that our nations and our leaders are a part of that process.
Through Danielle's leadership and help, we were actually able to engage multiple ministries in the government to have, I think, very meaningful policy conversations and communication conversations. And so my experience with Danielle was her quiet leadership at those kinds of tables. Her ability to speak when it mattered and speak the hard truths, but speak them in a compassionate, kind way that nobody got their back up. And I just watched it all.
I'm trying to think now strategically if we show them very clearly how these two things must go hand in hand. So the anti-racism and decolonization lead cannot fully meet their tasks and responsibilities without the participation of Indigenous rights holders.
As Indigenous peoples, as First Nations, as Métis, as Inuit peoples, we have these incredible teachings and gifts and resources. So I think there's actually this incredible opportunity to benefit everybody.
We are definitely just creating space for Indigenous rights holders and pushing back against white supremacy and racism. So I think if we ground ourselves in that in relation to this document, we're holding space, and then we don't need to have all the other answers today, but we do need to be grounded in rights-based principles, in distinctions-based approaches. We'll see how that lands. I'm always wildly optimistic.
COVID-19 elbowed traditional political topics off the table. So as a journalist, I just dove headfirst into this, realizing this was going to be the dominant story of my lifetime. I mean, this was the Great Depression, this was the Second World War. In terms of that significance, for at least a couple of years, it was so intense.
Those are all the notebooks, the daily cases since the pandemic began.
One of the things that will stand out to me forever is early on in the pandemic, I got a question from a guy about my age who wrote to me and said, you know, I've never reached out to a reporter before. I feel very uncomfortable doing this. This is deeply personal. My wife and I are trying to have a baby. I don't know what to do. And it really brought it home to me that, you know, this was deeply personal to every individual.
People stopping me on the street, wanting advice, but of sharing incredibly personal information. You get repeat emails or calls from people, you know, help me on this, help me understand.
This was very scared people turning to their newspapers and their radio and their TV saying, what do I need to know? Just tell me what I need to know. Analyzing the pandemic caused me to get death threats because they wanted me to report Dr. Henry was wrong. And she wasn't wrong most of the time. It's the pressure of people wanting traditional media to abandon their roles and tell them what they want to hear.
Remembering where we have been and what we have come through can help us put where we are today in a perspective, and can help us remember a lot of what we have learned and experienced together. Early on, we set our goals for this pandemic, and those remain today. And that is to reduce morbidity and mortality, so sickness and death, as much as possible, to protect our healthcare system, because we know if the healthcare system gets overwhelmed, then people who have other issues as well are not able to get the care they need, and that has impacts on our health. And very importantly, to minimize societal disruption, because we know that that also has impacts on our health, both our mental health, our physical health, our emotional health, particularly over time.
How do we have meaningful conversations about the fact that every intervention we put in place to control a pandemic has a cost, and it may be a health cost. Many of the interventions actually have harm. And how do you have that conversation in a meaningful way at the population level?
You said looking back helps to put things into perspective. So 2 years into the pandemic, what is there that you and Minister Dix wish that British Columbia had done differently? What are your regrets?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm at the point where regrets are what we need. The orders, the most recent orders, are due for review. And if we are continuing on this trajectory, then yes, I do hope that we will be able to lift some of those restrictions. But I can't give you the details of that specific announcement. I hate those questions. What do you regret? Well, I don't know. I regret everything. I regret every single person who died, you know? November 6, 2020, I should have done this. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better.
I think some in the media did a pretty poor job of creating a false equivalency between Dr. Henry and unrelated experts in academia or medicine who didn't have the data, who didn't have the public health expertise, and quite frankly didn't know what they were talking about. And we elevated them in some situations to be a direct questioner of her decisions, and that confused the public. It did a disservice to the public, I think, and quite frankly, for most of this pandemic, there was almost no one who had the information and the credibility to second guess what Dr. Henry was doing.
The notion that there was a magic solution to COVID-19, wearing 2, 3, 4 masks, N95 masks only, or having a rapid test to be able to stop on a street corner to make sure you were still okay to carry on with your day. I mean, it got to the absurd.
We never had a major public health event occur at the time of social media. And I think we were ill-prepared to communicate meaningfully when there is a force that is faster, broader, and more anonymous.
In the United States, this notion that it wasn't really a thing under the Trump administration, it was like, what's wrong with these people? And you've got this Fauci, Dr. Fauci, who decades of service to multiple political stripes in the United States being sidelined by someone who wanted you to take horse dewormers. I mean, that was the space with which Bonnie had to engage with our public here in Canada and in British Columbia.
I'm just really thankful that there's so many people that are vaccinated, because this would have been a disaster.
What's happening now with these supposed trucker protests, whatever they want to call them, it is the work of far-right groups to destabilize Western democracies in the US and Canada. This is not a new thing. It's been going on for a long time. This is just the newest aspect of it. They'd realized the pandemic could be used in their favor.
It's an expression of freedom for Canadians to make their own choice. So I'm hoping that this tells the government that we need to lax on this and kind of adapt to what the world needs as, democracy, freedom, choice, and not have such stringent rules and strict rules on forcing people to do things using freedoms as coercion. It's an imprinting thing. It's important for kids to see faces. My oldest, he's in elementary school, and they're covering up their faces in school. They're separating kids. They're not playing sports anymore. It's like it's all regulated to a point where it's like not enjoyable life, in my opinion. What I'd like to see change is that the vaccine passport be removed and people have a choice to freely live their lives. If I choose not to get vaccinated, then that's my choice, because they claim medical science proves that it helps, but I don't see a change in the numbers at all. And vaccinated people and unvaccinated people alike are getting sick.
There is no freedom to spread a deadly disease in any democracy anywhere in the world. That freedom doesn't exist. to Bonnie Henry. We need to have a safer situation in schools that will help lower the transmission of this virus. There should not only have been mask mandates in schools, there should have been an option for online learning this year as well as last with the advent of the Omicron virus. And since there were no viable vaccines for children, she had to deal much better with that situation.
That's all I really care about, is that my children have a future and that I can provide that future freely and they can make their own choices when they grow older. You know, there are some of us who disagree and are some of us who want to go our own way, and we can't cater to a single need. It needs to be something that caters to all. It's choice.
First declared the overdose emergency in 2016, 2017, 2018. You'd hear ambulances every 5 minutes, and it was people overdosing.
We have had a tragic record number of people who have died from the toxic drug supply that we are facing here in British Columbia. We need to care and support each other through this pandemic and through both our crises. And we need to continue to do what we have been doing, to be kind, to be calm, and to be safe.
What we've seen through the pandemic is there's a whole bunch of different factors that have led to a dramatically increased risk of dying. And where we're seeing it most, the proportion of people, it's now 78% of people who are dying are young men between the ages of 30 and 59.
In Europe for 30 years now, do have access to pharmaceutical heroin, style morphine, and they're much more likely to stay in treatment for a longer period of time and less likely to use drugs if they're on that. We don't offer that to more than about 100 people in North America. And that is...
We're working on that.
We're working on it, but it's slow.
But it's too slow.
It's way too slow.
If the public attention in COVID was applied to the overdose crisis, it would have been solved 6 years ago. They are both public health crises, and they both have the same leader. So she'll go into cabinet meetings and create orders on COVID that have widespread ramifications beyond anything we've ever seen in the history of this province, on businesses and people and schools and civil liberties and your health, and then go over and try and solve an equally deadly crisis in the overdose world, and the same people say, that's really nice. Show yourself out.
Decriminalization of people who use drugs is not a silver bullet. It's not the one thing that is going to make a difference. But it does take away one thing that is so important, and that's shame and stigma that keeps people from even talking about their drug use because they're afraid of losing their jobs, and they're afraid of losing their children and losing and not being able to get an apartment, or, you know, just all of these things that are dependent on not having a criminal record.
There was definitely a misperception of risk. We spent 5 years onto that point, really, really trying to make sure that we make it possible and safe for people to not use alone. And suddenly, the thing that was perceived as to be dangerous was to be with other people.
How are you doing? I'm good. How are you? Good. Great.
There's a really wonderful community in the downtown east side, and I've lived in lots of different places in my life, and I feel very at home in the downtown east side. A lot of people feel very at home, especially if you've had any kind of trauma in your life. There's a lot of people down there that will just be understanding on a different level. I certainly feel that way. Like, my father was homeless, and if you've had any mental health issues, you're very well accepted in the downtown east side, and no one judges you the way that they do in different parts of society. And I would say that it's getting worse, not better, in terms of how people judge each other. The divide of poverty is getting bigger, and people are more frustrated about that. I mean, people are falling into poverty that didn't necessarily before. So there's a lot more problems for people. I mean, COVID, a lot of people lost their job. When people lose their jobs, they end up using drugs. There's so many pills online, like there's pressing pills with fentanyl in them. So a lot of people are just getting addicted to fentanyl in all kinds of different ways. So it's just so important to get people something that's an alternative. This is the Safe Supply Conference. There's a community action team in Vancouver that's comprised of the city, province, and different levels of government, and they're coming together with drug users and drug user groups and different nonprofit organizations to discuss safe supply and the way forward, trying to get safe supply to people in the middle of a crisis. To get drug users to a conference, you need to supply them a place to go so that they can use while they're at the conference, so you're not sending them out into the alleys, and that they can easily use here in a safe manner and be able to come to the conference and share their perspective on the overdose crisis, and also because they're the ones that people should be talking to. Yeah, I would say that this would go to the smoking area, and then if people come to the smoking area and they want to inject, you send them over here. People had a lot more on their minds to deal with in COVID. Their day-to-day needs are so much more relevant minute to minute than a crisis. They were already in crisis. How could it possibly get worse? The privilege of being able to even entertain that there's a pandemic going on and what to do about that is just not top of mind.
This fentanyl just destroyed my veins. I'd shot for 25 years and no problems. Fentanyl comes in, within 2 years I can't use my veins at all whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, what we need to do is just get the toxic supply off the street, so we're just hoping that...
Gotta get those fucking benzos off the street.
Yeah, the benzos are bad.
Bad for everything.
Obviously, when we first opened in 2016, what we did was seen as illegal, but soon people realized that so many people were dying and overdosing, in the neighborhood that we were in, that we had to do something. Politically, it just seems like you don't always get what you need politically because they're just so worried about every little step forward. Whereas something like COVID, everyone wants to jump on it and things happen the next day because there isn't stigma, and so it's like the tale of two crises. It's been a very difficult journey in watching how people care about one thing and not another just because of stigma.
I think you just have to say we're proceeding because we want to keep the message hard right now. Get as many people vaccinated as we can. Yes. They're not moving. We're just proceeding, and the date hasn't changed.
No.
Okay. I'll see you
all right.
online.
See you. Bye.
I'm on my way. Bye.
Well, here we are 2 years in, and it is almost exactly, I think it was March 12th or March 11th, the WHO declared the pandemic. And our first big restrictions came into place on March 12th, March 13th. So we're in a transition phase now because of immunity, because so many people are vaccinated, that we need to tip it towards reducing those impacts on society now. We need to focus on all of the things that didn't get done in the public health realm. So we're behind on childhood immunizations. We know that there's still a tremendous amount of work we need to do around the toxic drug crises. We know that the mental health issues need to be addressed. And if we can work on building resilience, that's going to help people get over this without having long-term mental health impacts. Next week, hopefully, we'll be giving the announcements about the mask mandates. We'll stop doing weekly updates. We'll just do them if needed. That's the goal. Is this the music they usually play? In the OR sometime when I used to assist, we used to play AC/DC quite a bit. I'm a big AC/DC fan. Good, I can figure out what I'm going to say. Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I want to start by acknowledging today that the world is a little bit more uncertain, and for some people that can be provoking anxiety and fear.
Often we will do 5, 6, 7 stories a day on COVID, and even though they were available every day, it often did not provide enough of what we needed, where I had 2 questions and I would try to turn it into 4 or 5 different topics because we had to fill gaps in every single story.
We ease up restrictions and then BC gets slammed by another surge of cases.
how resilient is BC going to be in the face of that next wave if it comes?
Yeah, I think that is the question that all of us are thinking about globally.
I do feel that what was driving media was the sky's falling story. Media reported how many schools had an outbreak, not how many didn't. Because how many schools didn't have an outbreak is not a story. But an outbreak in a school is a story.
The answer really is we don't know what's going to happen next, and we need to find some way of finding some breathing room for our healthcare system, our healthcare workers, and for everybody else who's been tired through all this.
She bore the weight, the different agendas of politicians, of the public, of business and public health. And she was at the cold face of that every day. It was personal.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Until the next time.
I think it went okay. Got my message out. I would recognize that uncertainty makes some people really anxious. They want to know exactly what's going to happen now, and then they want to know exactly what's going to happen next. And that's a tough thing. It's a really tough thing. And, data never tells you exactly what to do. That it always has to be put in the context of values and preferences and judgments. And it's trying to find that mix. But yeah, nothing is easy. It's all messy. It's all hard.
He said, anybody can research various journals or studies online, and everyone can find the data that supports their narrative. He said, but I've been a physician for 25 years, and not everyone knows how to interpret the data and how to apply it to the population that you're working with.
It's hard for people to understand the difference between proportions, actual numbers, and risk, relative risk. And what we call odds ratios, or relative risk. Lung cancer and smoking. Everybody has a story about, oh, wow, my uncle smoked 3 packs a day and he died at 95. Yeah, that's a story. That's not data.
Yes.
That's a story.
Yeah. So tonight is a milestone night, recognition for the work that you've done, being one of the top 50 influential people in this province. Think about where you were 2.5 years ago. Do you think you would have been on that list?
Oh, no. No. I was still trying to get people to pay attention to decriminalization.
Yes.
Hopefully, the pandemic's over, I'll gently fade away and I won't be on the list at all next year.
How quickly do you think that'll happen, Bonnie?
I hope. It'll be nice.
One of the observations that I've had is walking down the street with you, and when I first realized that people were stopping and turning and going, that's Bonnie Henry, that's Dr. Henry. Oh my goodness, it's Bonnie Henry.
People say to me, John, do you know that Bonnie is wearing your shoes? I said, really, is she? Somebody in the legislature somewhere was filming her and filming her shoes. And so her shoes were being posted on social media. And then I saw her slogan, be kind, be calm, be safe. And I thought, wow. That's amazing. What a lovely thing to say. What a lovely person to be able to, that's where she focuses on. And I remember talking to her on the phone once and going, well, I hope it'll all be over soon because this, all this publicity is a bit much. And I'm saying, Bonnie, I'm sorry to tell you, that ship has sailed. So you are a fixture in British Columbia and probably Canada. She's part of British Columbia's history now.
I think they feel that they know me, and that is, in some ways, it's gratifying because it means I've connected with people. And hopefully that means it's made it less difficult for them to get through a really difficult time.
I don't know that you'll fade into anonymity that quickly.
We'll see.
But take it and use it, though.
This is one of those things. I that level of trust to try and address some of the other issues that we've been seeing, particularly the toxic drug crises. And, not a lot of it is overt right now. I'm doing a lot of behind the scenes using my influence.
Channel it for good.
Change the world. Oops. You're not allowed to use that. Yeah. I don't think it fits very well in this.
You see, I quite like that one. It's a little sassy, and I like the shoulder pads.
Right. Have flu fogs. Ready to travel.
Ready to roll.
How are you
Doctor,
this
how you
evening?
doing?
I'm
I
well.
usually bring my own camera crew too.
Yeah, you know.
Come on in.
Happens all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. You have to get in the drink lineup.
Yeah, exactly. I have this tonight, and then there's the Order of BC thing on Thursday.
Oh,
so
okay.
that's like way more
Congratulations.
socializing than an introvert like me can do in a week. So. I'm Bonnie.
Yes, I know. I'm Donnie.
Donnie?
I'm Donnie Rosa. I'm with the Park Board. We all have been on board with trying to do everything we can safely for Parks and Rec. But
you guys have done
like
great.
everybody else, we idolize you. So thank you. And
Well, we should take a picture.
I am no stranger to
Yes, of
selfies.
course, please. There we go.
This is everything we have.
Everyone. So the first category that we're going to be celebrating is people in politics and government. She's held down a seemingly thankless and grueling job without end, but her steadfast presence offers a comforting assurance during this topsy-turvy time. Taking the heat for lose-lose decisions as she works to keep us safe, one request, can someone get her soothing voice on a meditation app? Congratulations to Dr. Bonnie.
Try again. You know, it's been a journey that we have done together, and I just want to say thank you. I'm the face and the voice of a very strong team, some of whom you've met already here tonight. And just remember, our superpower is kindness. Thank you. I don't know. I'm kind of scared. I'm waiting for people to. It's the whole imposter syndrome. I love to cook. It's one of the things that relaxes me. It's that instant gratification too. So when things turn out, and I have a really stressful day, come home and cook something, it just takes my mind off it and gives me time to relax. I'm hoping people just take it slow and that we keep going on the right path and start getting back to doing all those things that we really need, you know. We remember that we're social creatures. We need to be with people and do that safely. I'm looking forward to going out to eat. I miss having other people cook for me. Oh, wow. Growing up as we did, moving around a lot, but being really from a small island, I really missed it. Like when I lived in Toronto, it doesn't have that same rhythm and sound and smells. I'm out of the office for the day. This is my favorite color, cobalt blue, also known as Michelob beer bottles. But
I do like the colors. And I've been on a learning journey about the pandemic and how we can use every opportunity to break down some of these colonizing structures that we have in place. And one of the very early on was this part of our Emergency Act in BC that says that they have to have my permission to get paid to get emergency funds to take measures to protect communities. And it was like, that makes no sense. But it just was, people's way of thinking is so embedded in, well, this is how we do things that we've set up to do. And so it took us a long time to get that removed, and it was really eye-opening to me.
This is one of the reasons that I love working with Bonnie, because she walks the walk. She's not just about the words. She really does believe in her core about taking the difficult steps that are required to uphold Indigenous rights. And it is hard work.
It's so nice here.
The Chilcotin are the most southerly of the Athapascan-speaking peoples, because that's the same as us. We're Athapascan.
What's that?
Oh, it's a bag, and these are gloves and gauntlets.
What's this surrounding?
I don't know. It doesn't tell us a whole lot about that. That's why it would be so nice to be here with somebody who is Kwakwakiwak, who could tell us. And can you imagine, all these things are their things, and they're here in this museum.
What are these?
Those are all masks.
Why do they wear them?
They use them in different ceremonies and dances. Look at these rattles. How cool is that?
Come on, let's go.
Come on, let's
Look
go.
at the
What's
drums.
next? Some Jenny stuff. Oh, whoa, Northern Tichone. So again, oh look, it's like, maybe, look. Same thing, belt.
These are what they used to dress up in?
Plains Cree, yeah. Whoa, oh look.
It's a sash.
Yeah, it's a Métis sash. Hello. Beautiful, look at that. Coming to the museum it's conflicted, because it's so nice to feel connected to ancestors in that way and be able to see things that are so old. And then knowing that most of those pieces are here without the consent of the artists who created them, and that because they're here, they're not in their communities where they should be, and the people who really need those medicines don't get to have them easily because they're here.
Mama, I love you.
I love you too. Nimyoiten. Jagi hao, Maeve. Jagi hao. What a great day. Did you like it?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been up here in ages.
Oh my gosh, look how beautiful this is. It's so pretty.
It is. Although long known to First Nations people, the strait received its present name in 1787 when they proved it was not the Northwest Passage.
Yes. We'll commemorate our wrongness.
Yes.
In so many ways. So many spectacular ways.
Commemorative to the European errors.
Yeah. Traveling to somebody's territories and barging in and just erecting a monument to myself would be like, it would just be so disrespectful. So that part I find quite fascinating, because we don't really blink an eye, and maybe we do now. We think
do
about
now.
it more
I think
critically.
we do now.
Yeah.
And I mean, I hope we do now. I've been thinking about the phrase, how do we marry Indigenous wisdom and Western knowledge?
Yes. Yeah.
Because it is, I mean, I think wisdom and knowledge are powerful words.
Yes.
And they have different concepts, but that they work together.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, just thinking about not wanting to diminish that Western knowledge base in having these hard conversations, because there are gifts in that, like these tremendous gifts, but finding ways to, safely invite Indigenous wisdom into the room. I think the other piece that I so appreciate is this question of what work and whose work. So there's this work of healing, of restoring and maintaining our cultural continuity. So, and I did Michif class yesterday with the girls, and at the end of the class, I was almost in tears because I thought, this is such hard work, and like, I don't know that I'm gonna get there, you know? And I'm doing it at the end of my work day, and it's hard, but I know that's the important sacred work, so I was frustrated because there was a bunch of things that I said incorrectly. My teacher was very, very gracious and was just, you know, helping to coach me, but I just thought, oh, this is a lot of work to learn or relearn this language. So that was in the evening.
You don't have to be perfect.
I know.
Right away.
Right away. But this is our work, the language, the ceremony, our responsibilities to our lands and waters, to our ancestors, to our descendants. That's a huge piece of work. And then there's the settler work that is addressing, arresting white supremacy and racism. And that's the work primarily of settlers. And we can guide and we can be allies to that. But that's not our work. So why do you keep showing up to do the work, Bonnie? I'd like to know, what's your secret?
I think innately I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I believe in people, you know, and I
Yeah.
believe in kindness, that it does make a difference. And
Yeah.
people have heard that.
Well, that's it. People want to be seen and heard, you know? I'm thinking, too, with the toxic drug poisoning, how people want their loved ones to be seen and valued.
I despair a little bit. I feel like the drug-using community had very high expectations of what I could do.
Yeah.
And then I failed.
I think everybody has very high expectations of what you can do. And that's the part I always really admire your grace, because I would definitely have been at the end of my rope so many times, just being like, oh my God!
Have I taught you nothing?
I'm thinking,
You're not the boss of me, but just tell
Yeah.
me what to do.
Yeah.
Right now.
Because then I can be really mad at you for telling me to do the thing I don't want to do. I loved that Dina Hinshaw quote in one meeting. I think it was at the Canadian Women's, whatever that gathering was, when she was just like, you know, I think COVID is a lot like parenting. She's like, it is relentless and unfair. And I was like, yes.
And you can't just walk away.
Yeah, you can't just walk away. It's completely unfair. There's like, you know, repeatedly these messes that you're left to kind of try and manage to the best of our ability, given whatever the constraints are.
Although there's apparently some benefits to having children.
Oh, yeah. So they say, yeah. Yeah.
I think it's the most amazing thing that in BC we've been able to keep kids in school for the majority of the pandemic. Certainly as a mom, I know that that was critically important. But Bonnie took a lot of backlash for that. And even people calling into question her personal life and, you know, the fact that she doesn't have children and how could she, you know, that she's making these decisions from a place that lacks compassion. And that couldn't be anything farther from the truth, because from where I sit and the way that I see Bonnie, it's like she has 5 million children because she honestly, you know, carries the weight of each and every one of us, and wanting to get us all through this pandemic with the least impact of this virus, but also the least impact of all of the measures.
I think it's been a marathon for 2 years with hardly a day's break, constantly on the case. This has gone on longer than anything in our life has. I mean, as public health officers, we actually train for this.
It's been fight or flight for 2 years. That was hard work. And I think, I mean, for her, it'll be I would assume, a life-defining and career-defining experience.
She's not a politician. Obviously, sometimes there's differences in the way that the government and Bonnie, as a public health expert, would maybe not see eye to eye, but she always stayed on the side of her expertise in public health and stood her ground.
Her heroism, as you might call it, helped the public trust in her messaging from the beginning. People paid more attention to her, followed her orders to a greater degree than in other provinces, trusted her more than in other provinces. We saw a better first wave reaction in BC.
People responded to her because it was clear that she was struggling with this extraordinary international challenge. Her kindness and compassion just comes through in every engagement you have with her, public or private.
I've learned that I have a certain resiliency, and I think that, I think that's reflected in people around this province anyway, and friends and colleagues I know, that we can be tough when we need to be. I am getting more comfortable with wearing my heart on my sleeve, being open, being honest about my vulnerabilities, my fears, but also the fact that I absolutely care. That's what community is, and that's what we've tried to inspire people. And for the most part, people have risen to that here in BC, and that makes me really proud.
It's almost impossible to imagine what the next stage is like. Maybe Bonnie can imagine it. I hope she can. I know that she would like to go back to being able to walk down the street and have no one recognize who she is.
Okay, enough. You want to run?